Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, so we change from normal. I'm here to ask you a favour today at Prism. We need to raise some money. We don't need a king's ransom. We don't need a salary, a new house in the sunny suburbs of Ayrshire, but we do need a wee bit of help. Often at the request of viewers, we've been filming Prism at live events. We know many of you love the show. The growth in the viewer numbers tells us that. Prism currently has more viewers than the national newspaper has subscribers. It's the most watched Scottish political podcast out there, which is down to you guys. So thanks for that. We really do appreciate it. But in order to do the live shows, we need to borrow equipment from friends and colleagues. And for that, we're eternally grateful for their help. However, it means our techies are constantly working with equipment they are unfamiliar with and often unsure how to deal with issues that arise. And from some of our live shows, I'm sure you know that. The solution, of course, to that is to have our own equipment, which enables us to practice, play with settings, etc., to make sure that you get the best experience as well. So any money raised in the first instance will go towards acquiring the necessary hardware. Any extra will be a great help towards our increasing software costs. Just to give you an example, because we now give you more than an hour every Sunday, our costs have doubled. As soon as you go over an hour, the software charges double. And we'll just finish paying that. We get a bit of a fright, but it's paid. So if you can help us, no matter how much, how little, how small, it will be greatly appreciated. So if you feel you're able to help, here's how you can do it. Firstly, you go to the YouTube through a Scottish Prism channel, and on the Prism page, there's a picture banner right across the top of the page. On the right-hand side of the banner, there's a small PayPal donation button. Now, that will take you to our donations page. On this page, you can choose how much you want to donate. No amount is too small. No amount's too big. And if all of our subscribers gave us 50 pence or £1, that would probably cover it. You also get to choose whether it's a one-off donation or a regular monthly donation. This is separate from Barhead Boy. I have some really loyal, great subscribers there who give me monthly subscriptions, and for that I am grateful because it keeps the Barhead Boy going. So just go to that page. When you finally choose your payment method, that's it, we're done. You viewers have been exceptional in your support for Through Scottish Prism and its journey to where it is now. With your continued support, we hope to take it further. We have plans, lots of them, starting this Sunday, where we're actually going to do a live show. That should be fun, so strap in for that one. Thanks so much for your backing. It means a lot to me personally and to the team. We all appreciate it. So you're here for a reason. It's to hear the midweek show. Enjoy it, and I'll see you later in the show. Take care. Well, hi folks. Welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. It's the end of term show here. And I thought I'd put on my wee Roddy t-shirt. I like it. We end this season because Holyrood, of course, finished on Friday, and that's it, closed down till September. We won't be closing down, no, because things happen. As soon as we did it before, as soon as we decided to go take a wee break and go on holiday, all hell usually breaks loose. But what we will be doing is stopping the midweek show, and instead we'll be having something every week for you that's topical. And if something political turns up, like, I don't know, someone been arrested and charged for frauds, for example, we'll be there to comment, and we'll be with you through the summer. But it'll be slightly different until our friends in Holyrood and Westminster return, and we can get back to being a political review show. And can I just say, on the crowdfunder, your generosity has been immense, and I can't thank you all enough. And you're going to see the benefits in the coming weeks and months. As I said, we've got some great plans, and we'll be releasing them as time goes on. But anyway, without any further ado, let me bring in, I've got the whole team here today,
because it is the end of season show. So we thought we'd give you everybody we've got. And we'll start, of course, with the Coatbridge Cavalier himself there over in North Dakota. My man, Phil, how are you?
Splendid. I'm absolutely delighted. My youngest is visiting me over in Fargo in North Dakota and loving it. So she's here for a couple of weeks. So celebrating that and loving every minute of her being here. I was just in Spain. I managed to catch up with my older two children, and I'll head back to Bonnie, Scotland, obviously next month to catch up with them all again. So good summer, a good summer all in. Happy days.
Good. I'll be catching up with you when you come back as well. I've booked in for a liver transplant the following week. And up there. And from Edinburgh, we've got our Lloyd, who's my midweek colleague who's come to join us tonight. Thank you for being here again, Lloyd.
Glad to be here.
You know we don't pay overtime, but you know we don't pay, but you know, certainly don't do overtime. Thank you for being here. Great to see you again as always, my friend. And up in Clackmannanshire, our favourite lawyer. Here she is, our Eva. Eva, how are you, my friend?
Hi, Roddy. Good, yeah. I'm just a wee bit disappointed that we've lost the lovely sun and it's been replaced by torrential rain day after day. So I'm hoping that it'll be better weather this weekend.
It's well. You don't like the weather in Scotland, hang about 20 minutes, as they say. Exactly. You just don't know. And I see you've got all our dolls there in safekeeping. Excellent. And no show would be complete without our wonderful bard, the Shakespearean nationalist, Yvonne. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you for that. Yes, all good. Great to see the gang together.
Good. And I hope you're not going to be on your best behaviour tonight.
I will endeavour to be on my best behaviour.
No, we don't like that. We don't like that. Anyway, folks, here we are. It's been another week, the end of term, for want of a better phrase. Eva, it's only been about a week since the SNP put out their plan. It's not a plan, it is a plan that could be. And it's in absolute tatters and disarray. They didn't think it through, did they?
I think you're being a little more polite than I expected, Roddy. Disarray is putting it mildly. Hamza's performance was bad enough last Saturday, as we covered on our live show on Sunday, but it got signally worse. With the headlines where Mike Russell, in bold and red, was pointing out that it wasn't difficult to understand at all.
Just think that one up, Techie, would you?
And he succeeded only in confusing people even more. That was then followed by the horrendous interview with Jamie Hepburn, who smirked and sniggered all the way through, completely failing to explain what the plan actually was, other than to claim that a majority of seats, as opposed to a majority of votes, would be sufficient to enter into independence negotiations. He was challenged particularly on how could that be the settled will of the Scottish people, when he had previously said that the settled will comprised 60% support for independence, and yet he could claim that winning a majority of seats, which might represent only 35% or so of the popular vote, was also the settled will of the Scottish people. So he made a complete fool of himself and his party. So the week has not been a clever one at all for the SNP, not least because they have repeatedly failed to address the great challenge that there is in the Scotland United proposal, where we would harness every single vote for Scottish independence and not alienate the at least 20% of the population who support Scottish independence but do not support the SNP. So there's a lot of work to be done by the independence movement, and the SNP in particular to face reality, which, judging by events of the last few months and years, is something that they're still struggling to do.
Yeah. Lloyd, you've been in the media industry and journalism for a long, long while. One of the things you don't do is, in politics, and say, as Mike Russell did, it's not confusing. In other words, you're all stupid. And that's the problem, not the policy. Not a good look.
It's, for the past number of years, it's never been a good look from the master of verbosity and vacuous verbosity at that. Mike Russell, you know, bursting out to try and remind the world that everybody in the SNP is clever because he vetted them all. Mike Russell telling us that we don't understand something which, frankly, the people who were trying to explain it, even to themselves from the Scottish National Party in Dundee, couldn't understand. You know, Pete Wishart, within 5 minutes of Humza making the statement that he made, Pete Wishart had completely, well, he so little understood it, he reversed the idea completely. No, this has now gone way, way beyond a shambles and exposes yet again, at the core, these people do not have independence in their mind. They don't have a route, they don't have a pathway, but most importantly, they do not have the fire in their belly to deliver the only means by which we can address the social problems that face our people.
Yeah, it is quite worrying. Another thing that came across as so unprofessional, Phil, was Humza was saying, yeah, we're going to be sending emissaries to Brussels, to the EU, to put our case, and the following day the EU turned around and went, nah, you can't do that. You're a third-party nation and you're a region of that nation. And it seems that he spouted out this strategy, and he hadn't checked with the EU or anyone within the party to see if they could actually do that. Again, it reeks of absolute amateur.
Yeah, and worse than amateur. I mean, we know this. We know this to be the case. We knew this to be the case before Nicola was handed the reins. So it is, and I would reiterate and echo what Lloyd has said, it's yet more evidence that the current SNP are not serious about fighting for Scotland's independence. These chancellors do not represent the Scottish people who want independence for our people in our country. Eva's on the money with the Hepburns and Mike Russell. Lloyd's bang on with Pete. I know them, so I'm not surprised. But people need to understand what they see happening in front of them. You know, like there's the Spectator kind of nailed it with Lucy Dunn's article, and I know they're no friends of independence, but during her 8 years in Scotland's First Minister, Lucy writes, Nicola Sturgeon perfected the art of false promises. This is a continuation of the same. She constantly told SNP supporters that a second independence referendum was within reach, but the truth was that she had no power to deliver one. And that still remains the case. And all Sturgeon was able to do was lead her troops halfway up the hill before having to bring them back down again. So no more of this grand old Duke of York crap, because that's who's pulling the strings. This is perfidious Albion at work. And these clowns are now they're tied to the strings, and they are the puppet masters of the British state. And it's time people woke up to that fact. And it's not pretending that all Humza has to do is change his mind. Humza will do what he's told, or will no longer be in position. It's time that people rose up within SNP. And some saying it's too late. I don't think so. I think the power of the people should not be underestimated. And if there's enough people still in the SNP, which is the moot point, that's the question. Is there enough people in the SNP with fire in their belly, willing to fight for the cause? Then these are the people that need to stand up, take control of your own party again, and allow those of us who have been pushed out or thrown out to take control. Because otherwise, quite frankly, the more attractive option is rapidly and every day it becomes the more attractive option to move towards Alapa and look towards Alapa and Alex and the strategists that invented the SNP's success and dominance to deliver independence for Scotland.
Yeah, I'm not as confident as you, Phil. I mean, the last week their membership was there and they were very compliant. There was no dissension whatsoever. They just allowed them to run their show. So I'm kind of hamadoots that the membership are capable of pulling it around. Yvonne, Mike Russell tells us it's quite simple, quite straightforward. So, but I'm just a thicko then. So they're going to say a vote for the SNP is a vote for independence. But he also said it was a vote to ask for a Section 30, or is it a vote to negotiate independence, or is it what?
You know, everyone's throwing around the C word here, and I'm going to as well. It is confusing. It is complicated. And I think it's Mike Russell who's dazed and confused, not the voters. I mean, the meetings that that they had that promised so much and delivered so little was the start of it. And it's probably been, I reckon, the worst week in Humza Yousaf's life in his political career. You know, how humiliating for him to talk about, oh, we're going to go into Europe, and then Europe stick two fingers up and say, you're not coming in, Bonnie lads, you know, we're not interested. And the message is quite clear. You know, it was just so cringeworthy. And you can't shake off basic mistakes like that. You know, if you want to be part of Europe, make sure you've got an invite in the first place. Instead, he looks like some sort of insignificant gate crasher who's turned up to a nightclub wearing jeans instead of a dress suit. It's just such a basic error. And of course, we've been talking about EFTA and how easy it would be just to walk into EFTA, and why he's not looking at that is it's a real mystery. But this week has been absolutely disastrous for him. I mean, every week, let's face it, has been disastrous. Something new has been thrown up. Chief Mammy's been arrested. All sorts of things are going on. But this was total humiliation. And I think that could have triggered the string of resignations we've seen as well. So, you know, there's a lot of confusion out there around the SNP.
Yeah, for sure. Because one of the other things, again, it's not been done. If we remember back when the party voted to start a new currency, Sturgeon ignored it, and they implemented the Charlotte Street Partners, which was to still continue sharing the pound. Now, you can't get into the EU if you're sharing a currency, particularly sharing the currency of a country that's not a member of the EU. They haven't addressed the currency, and yet they're talking about getting back into the EU. It's just, there's no planning whatsoever.
There is planning, but it's not sensible planning. It's not focused. It's not intelligent. And it's certainly not taking cognizance of the real world in any way, shape or form. I think the plan, though, is about how to keep certain people in certain positions. The plan is clearly not actually to drive towards Scottish independence, because if it was, there's a lot of things going on just now that wouldn't be happening, and there's preparatory work that would be well underway. The Scottish Government should be speaking to EFTA. Alba's spoken to EFTA. It's easy. It takes about 3 months to get into EFTA. We would satisfy any entrance requirements that they have on day one. There's no big deal there. There are huge issues in relation to the potential to enter the EU, and it's not necessary. There is no point in having a pipe dream about what we'll do after independence if there is no cogent plan to take us to independence. And right now, the SNP, the Scottish Government, as between the SNP and the Greens, are actually still fighting with each other, because it looks like both the SNP and the Greens, despite the fact that they're in coalition in Holyrood, are going to put candidates up against each other in the general election for Westminster. What is the point in that if the raison d'etre of both is independence? This again illustrates why Scotland United is the only sensible way forwards. It's absolutely ridiculous to see the potential of a country failing to be maximised, and instead, on a daily basis, sometimes several times a day, the Scottish Government hits the headlines for all the wrong reasons. I mean, one big deal I was reading about earlier today is to do with the justice system. And yesterday, a court in Ireland refused an application by the Scottish justice system to extradite from Ireland to Scotland a man who's wanted to go on trial in Scotland. He's not being extradited because the Irish courts have decided that the Scottish justice system is failing and it's not a safe place to which somebody can be extradited. The reasons for that are cited are a failure to properly look after the mental health and well-being of prisoners and serious overcrowding in some Scottish prisons, and those two which are named are Barlinnie and Low Moss. Now, what does that say about the state of this country? We've spoken often before about where the Scottish Government has gone wrong, and justice has been one of the most controversial areas. But to now know that a fellow European state, our nearest neighbour, Ireland, considers that our penal system is, in effect, subhuman and not one to which prisoners can safely be extradited, just shows how very, very far this country's international status has tumbled. It's unacceptable. And Humza Yousaf, as a former Justice Minister, Keith Brown as a former Justice Minister, and Angela Constance as the current Justice Minister all share the collective responsibility for those failings. Each of them should sign their letter of resignation tomorrow and apologise to the Scottish people for all the wrongs that they've committed.
Yeah, it's quite bizarre what's going on at the moment, Lloyd, on this. I mean, our reputation's shattered in Ireland, which should arguably, when independence comes, will be our closest ally. And we've now got reservations of about 10% of the Westminster MP contingent. It's around about 10%. I think it's 5 of them out of 48 are resigning and not been standing up again. Now, if you're very close to independence and it's been your lifetime's dream, it's kind of, if it's that close, why would you walk away from it?
I think the only reason you would walk away because you feel that you are not close. Who would not want to be part of the day when the Saltire flies outside the United Nations building? I mean, who would not want to be part of that? It's horrifying. But I mean, I think it just exemplifies what I've had in the back of my mind for a while, which is there is an acceptance, not yet made public, that the current leadership of the Scottish National Party believes that independence is not possible. It's a little bit too difficult. So they're hiding behind the virtue signalling of we're talking to Europe, we're supporting Ukraine, we're doing all these things. But in reality, they're going to have to tell the electorate at some point, and they're going to have to tell the electorate very, very soon. But what I don't understand, and it shows the shallowness and immaturity of their thinking, to constantly tell us that we're going to leap back into the European Union when there's even questions about senior members of the European Union, like France, whether or not they're going to remain in the European Union. This idea that our immature politicians believe that all international structures have a shelf life that is forever. And the fact of the matter is they don't. And the way the EU is shifting from being a trading marketplace, a place of exchange, to becoming a very firm military power and a foreign affairs power, which is going to carry out sanctions on its own members if they don't support whatever the Commission says we should be doing to what they deem rogue countries. You know, nobody in the SNP should be thinking as short term as we will do what Britain did. We have to start with a clean slate. In exactly the same way as Ireland started with a clean slate in 1921. We have to approach each and every treaty that we will inherit. We have to treat it in a manner which allows our people to decide whether or not we agree to it. Do we want to be in NATO? Do we really want to be in a European Union that's about to tear itself apart in the next 10 to 15 years? You know, no trading structure like the European Union in world history has lasted ad infinitum, and the European Union won't. That is why, and it has always been, the best position is to join what it actually is, the European Free Trade Area, EFTA.
Yeah, I agree. I'm an EFTA man myself, and I should tell you viewers, I'm trying to get someone from EFTA as one of our guests one time, and we can sit and talk about that. Phil, the EU, we know it does seem to be in a bit, but it started off and it was two things: to keep peace in Europe and trade. These were the two things, and they believed that with trading that you could avoid the conflicts of the past. And as Lloyd's pointed out, now they've gone full gung-ho, 51st state of America, Russia bad, and they're screwing themselves. Why would you want to join that organisation when we're just becoming independent?
Well, the sad reality is you wouldn't, in spite of the immense potential, the great promise, and the fact that the majority of Europeans want unification, are not warmongers. The sad reality is that almost all of our governments in Europe are now run by globalists or people who work tandem for what is best for those who remain in power and those who control what really goes on in the world, the military-industrial complex, hedge funds, banks, and that's another thing. It just came out recently, as if you need more evidence. The central banking digital currencies story. It's like this goes way back. And I'm in the States, obviously, in the Declaration of Independence, which owes much to the principles laid out in the Magna Carta. And obviously Scotland's declaration of our growth and claim of right and led to the US Constitution is only missing one thing, and that's according to Thomas Jefferson, and that was they warned against central banking. So what we've got now, the people running Europe are falling right into that same box. They currently are taking Europe down a place that Europe was never in. We the people of Europe didn't want. So no, it's a betrayal of the will of the people, and the Scottish people, including myself, who remain pro-European. I don't want to join Europe in its current format unless there are substantial changes to how Europe is run and the warmongering stops. Then I'm all for EFTA. It certainly is the easiest, quickest, and most sensible option. And also we can decide what we want to do with our currency, which of course will be Scottish. But no, it's really, really disappointing to see the demise of what was one of the most egalitarian, one of the most promising, one of the most democratic organisations, the European Union, come under control of those who would keep us on our knees.
No, it is quite sad. I've gone myself from a strong supporter of the EU to a very EU sceptic, not just over the Ukraine carry-on, but what happened here in Catalonia as well. I felt there was a bit of an abandonment of the people here. But that's another story for another show. This week as well, Yvonne, the Court of Session found against the Scottish Government and their DRS scheme, the much maligned deposit return scheme. And it seems that the company Circularity are going to be facing some heavy losses. And again, this is a government-sponsored company. It means that the Scottish taxpayer is going to take a hit for very badly drafted green legislation.
Well, the Scottish Government is looking more and more like the Muppet Show, and the person in the line of fire this time is Lorna Slater, who is, could easily stand in for Miss Piggy. She's as blind to her own faults as Patrick Harvey is. I mean, everything that this woman touches is a disaster. Everything, and she's a hypocrite as well. And the hospitality industry has been up in arms over all of her crazy schemes. And people have spent a fortune thinking that it's going to come on stream, it's going to happen, it's here, it's nearly here, and then it's been blown out of the water. It's crazy. And I would, like to know how much of the taxpayers' money, our money, has just been spaffed up the wall by the Greens so far. This is a relationship that Humza Yousaf says is worth its weight in gold. I don't know who told him that, but he keeps on saying it. Maybe if he says it often enough, he might start believing it. But he really needs to stop, assess the whole relationship and what it's cost him, because the Greens have cost the Scottish Government credibility. There's the spectre of the GRR bill, which still looms large and has still caused so much bad will. And again, all these green initiatives have just come back to to bite Humza Yousaf, and he needs to cut himself away from these lunatics that are dragging Scotland into a pit of comedy. It's awful to watch, and yeah, it's the sooner that we cut free from the Greens, and the better.
Indeed. Eva, if I was right, I mean, everything that the Greens have brought in, they've said about, you know, bicycles and the HMPA and the DRS. The only one left that is the GRRB. Have the SNP at last wised up because they stopped the deposit return scheme? Will they wise up, do you think, and say we need to get rid of the GRRB because it's a vote loser?
You know what this feels like now every week with the Greens and their latest mishap? It's like when I was a child and I used to watch Scooby-Doo, because you knew in the first couple of minutes of every edition that something was going to go badly wrong. You knew that it wasn't going to work. You knew there was a baddie there somewhere. And the punchline at the end was always, but we would have got away with it had it not been for those pesky kids. And it's the same kind of thing with the Greens, because every policy that they have promoted, innumerable, very sensible, highly experienced, knowledgeable people have predicted that even if the policy is one with a degree of common sense around it, the practical implementation of it invariably has been especially stupid and wrong-founded. I mean, the DRS is a case in point. They were warned over and over again in the past couple of years that it wasn't going to work. You had various people, obviously, most famously, including Fergus Ewing, explaining why it wasn't going to work, and they wouldn't give in. It was almost as if they thought that if they just continued to maintain a line, everybody else would surrender. And in the end, we've discovered today that it didn't really matter at all whether Westminster objected to it or not. The courts were always going to find against them. The court action which was reported today was heard last December. So for the last 6 months, the Greens and the SNP have been in a position of not knowing whether they were winning that action or not, but probably had pretty robust legal advice once more to the effect that their victory was most unlikely. So I cannot for the life of me understand why, A, Lorna Slater remains in her ministerial position, and B, why the Bute House agreement has not been literally ripped up like Fergus Ewing ripped up, you know, some equally ridiculous papers in the Scottish government, in the Scottish Parliament. We were told that the deal had a number of red lines. The red lines have all been rubbed out. You know, the highly protected marine areas shelved, DRS binned. We're left with the GRR bill, which is going to be a hugely expensive legal exercise. The Scottish government is not likely to win that. There's another debacle. So what's actually left in the context of the Bute House agreement? What heads of agreement remain? Probably hardly anything that we've ever heard about, and certainly nothing worthwhile keeping. If Humza was a leader at all, if Scotland and the benefits for Scotland were in his priorities, he would be phoning Patrick Harvey and Lorna Slater today and giving them their jotters. It's certainly what he should be doing now with delay.
The nonsense carries on regardless, Lloyd. The other one was and obviously ladies are going to come back round to you on this one as well. The Scottish Feminist Network had a meeting in Holyrood this week where it was discussing women in politics, and a lot of men turned up in wearing women's clothes, and that forced a lot of women to leave in anger, saying, you know, I thought this was for us women, but here it was, here's these guys who then made themselves out to be the victims because people objected to men being at a women's network meeting. It really is, the world's going to hell in a handcart.
I think the worst part of this, Roddy, is the fact that the organisation which was actually organising this is funded by central government. Its purpose is to bring more women into politics. Now, when challenged, the presiding officer, who in this circumstance is effectively the facilitator, she tried to claim that in actual fact it wasn't in breach of the Equalities Act. Well, I think they're going to find in another court in another place that that's not the situation. But then again, what's the golden thread running through this? Alison Johnson, Green. The two highlighted male pretending to be female, both Greens. One of them, Ernie Gomersall or Ellie Gomersall, I'm not sure which it is now the head of the National Union of Students in Scotland. What is it about Greens, particularly the Maggie Chapmans, the Lorna Slaters, the Mark Ruskalls? These are neo-colonialists. These are people who have come to live in our country. They don't like certain things about it, so they've moved into politics to change our country because it's not quite the way they want it. Well, why did they come here in the first place? Why are we paying so much attention to people who want to change some of the basic moral values that our people have held for hundreds of years simply to suit them when they've lived here 5 minutes? Now, I'm happy to see anybody come from anywhere in the world, but I, for one, spent a lot of time living in other places. Would I dare to have thought that I had the right to create legislation to change the culture of the country that I'm living in? If that's not this clear definition of colonialism as you can possibly get, then I'm a monkey, which I might well be. But this is nothing but neo-colonialism from within. The Green Party, who have decided to set themselves up as the fountainheads of knowledge on all matters moral, economic, and environmental, and the rest of us bloody well better get in line behind them. This is quasi-fascism in reality. That's where these people are going. They think everybody else in the country is wrong. You're phobic if you disagree with them. You're wrong. You're Neanderthal. How can we let this happen? The danger here is, of course, because they've got the green tag, and everybody thinks green is cuddly. I know lots of people that voted green. Immediately you mention to them where some of the bad things are coming that they complain about. You say, well, that's coming from the Green Party. Oh, but the Greens don't do that. The Greens don't do that. They have this kind of worldwide reputation for being the good guys. And I think when we saw Miss Thunberg turn up at Mr. Zelensky's house yesterday, that tells us exactly where the Greens are in real terms.
Yeah, quite shocking. Phil, how do we arrest this? It's just getting right out of order. You're muted, I think, my friend.
Yeah, in relation to the Greens and having them in power, obviously it's a balance of power thing, and it really just comes down to the strategy that the SNP, who we have to date been relying upon to represent us, to obtain our independence for our people and our country. The fact that the strategist since Alex was removed, and let's be blunt about this, from the SNP quite deliberately, and involving the British state to the collusion of the current leadership of the SNP, they have not had a valid, sensible strategy by which to obtain our independence, and that would include gaining a majority, something that only Alex Salmond has achieved in the Scottish Parliament, or if not that, then working with a party that you have more control over they do. This green tail wagging the yellow SNP dog is not working. It clearly is not working. And the only way you can address that is through the ballot box. And that means you need to come up with a tangible, practical, serious, well thought out and articulated strategy that the people can understand. As yet, we've not seen anything like that from Nicola or those of that ilk. None. Humza hasn't got it. We talked about it earlier. Mike Russell has failed to deliver it. The Hepburns will never ever come up with anything like that. These are sheep. These are sheeple, and they'll do exactly what they're told. We need leadership again, and we need a party that will show the leadership, map out the roadmap to our independence, tell us exactly what we plan to do to get it, then let the people decide. And if the SNP continue to do what they're doing, why don't they just come out and say it? They are not for independence. The current leadership, they seem more concerned about defending the current status quo, and that's not acceptable to me. Independence, nothing less. That was the mantra of the SNP and should be. If that's not the mantra anymore, be honest. Tell the truth, and that may be alien to certainly most of the people currently in the leadership of the SNP, because that's not what we're saying. So the answer to your question, Roddy, is you do it through the ballot box, and you need some integrity and honesty, and you need to be able to say what you stand for. And if it is independence, you need to show us you're serious about it, not this continuation of Nicola's failed policy that Hums is putting up, and the excuses you're getting are feeble and weak. So we need some real people with some backbone and some gumption, and I don't see that in the SNP right now. So you need to get rid of the Greens, who have become a joke, a disgrace, and we need to get the SNP. And the convenience here, of course, is that the SNP can blame the Greens, but I don't accept that. If you really are in power, you should be able to control. You should be able to control the Greens, and they're not doing it. So, nah. We need rid of the current leadership of the SNP, and we need rid of the Greens.
No, it's just a fact. You've touched on it, Yvonne. If you think the big ticket policies going through Holyrood for the last couple of years have been the GRRB, Greens, the cycles through the cities, all the cities, Greens, the deposit return scheme, the Greens. So where's the SNP policies? And where's their big ticket policies? They're meant to be the government. Surely it's their policies we should be hearing about, not the Greens.
Well, of course, the SNP blame everybody else for their woes. First it's Westminster, then it's Brexit. Eventually, when they start to write up their own brief history, it will be, they will wake up and blame the Greens. But we should be careful not to point the finger as well, because I was at a brilliant rally last weekend at Bannockburn. 6,000 turned up. Why the hell only 6,000 turned up? We had 20,000 at Glasgow. We go to Bannockburn, which has more meaning and if anything is going to stir up the Scots, it should be Bannockburn. 6,000 turned up, and I salute every one of them. They were dropping round like Buckingham Palace guards in the heat as they did that march to get to the historic field. But 6,000 isn't good enough. Now listen, if you weren't at Bannockburn, make sure that on July the 29th, you turn up to Ayr. I'll be there, Eva will be there, there'll be a Prism tent or marquee or stand there as well. If I can make it from the borders and Eva can make it from Clacks, and you can come over, Roddy, I don't know whether you will or not, then, we've all got to make an effort, because it's no use us sitting on our backsides blaming everybody else. Otherwise, we're just going to look like a pale imitation of the SNP, and we don't want that. If you want independence, if you really, really want it, then make sure that you're marching on July the 9th at the All Under One Banner March for Independence, and show not just your friends and your neighbours how much you feel about wanting independence, but show the world. It's no use us sitting spanking the SNP every week. It's one of the easiest things in the world to do. And, in boxing terms, they're leading with their chin all the time and make it so easy for us. But we need to check our own backyard as well. So there's my rant for the week.
I'm sure we'll have a few more before the show's over. Eva, the other thing is Edinburgh Zoo today has been this week's been in the news with their decision that unless you accept there's more than two sexes, there's not a job for you here at Edinburgh Zoo. I find that quite bizarre for people who are in a zoo.
kind of difficult to know where to begin. We all know about
Noah's Ark.
We all know about biology. Yeah, the animals went in 2 by 2. There's a reason for that. If I could rewind a little bit, Roddy, to the event in the Scottish Parliament that you covered.
Please do.
It was called Elect Her. Elect Her, there's a clue, is an organisation publicly funded to assist women into standing for election and becoming elected and to take an active position in politics. And Alison Johnson, as the presiding officer of the Scottish Parliament, was asked in advance of the event being held there last week to confirm that only biological women, or as we know them, women, would be allowed to attend. And she said that, and as far as she was concerned, legally, the definition of women, in fact, included trans women. And she was wrong, because under the Equality Act, you're entitled to claim the protected characteristic of gender reassignment. Gender is not a protected characteristic. Gender identity is not a protected characteristic. Sex is. And so that event, Elect Her, was designed for women. And it meant that it was actually only for women who were born female and remain female. That's the only kind of women that there are on the planet. It's all there ever has been. It's all there ever will be. But 2 of the people who attended there would consider themselves to be trans women. The one in particular who hit the headlines the most is not by any stretch of the imagination female, because that person is not only biologically male, but also has no GRC and is not legally female either. He had no right to be there.
No.
The presiding officer was wrong in allowing him in. But to add insult to injury, the event was oversubscribed. So every man who was in that event was taking a place that a woman could have and should have had and was denied, despite the fact that the very existence of the organisation is to promote women into politics and into positions of influence. So did you need any more of an example as to why women won't wish in that one? And if you did, there is another one, because ITV did an item the other day, news about the cost of living crisis, and they decided to show you the struggles of a mother. So this person was seen on screen, described as a mother who washed 2 dishes and then bent down to put 3 items of clothing in the washing machine and complained about the price of soap powder and electricity and what have you, and referred to themselves as a mother. It was a man. Now, I have no objection to it being a man. I don't care if it was somebody who calls himself a trans woman. But the hard fact of the matter is, if he considers himself to be a mother, most of the rest of the population who were watching that don't. Because to be a mother, you have to be female. He's not, and he never will be female. This is the kind of lunacy that's got to stop. But Rosie Duffield MP commented in a similar fashion to what I've done, probably more politely than I've just done. And she's been vilified once more on social media by a lot of famous people for stating the obvious, that you can only be a mother female. Yep.
I would say your guy in the ITV as well, as they say, he had hands like shovels as well.
He didn't.
Yeah, Lloyd,
just to add to what you were saying is, what I was really shocked by was the fact that this man actually works for the TUC, and the TUC have come out in total support of this individual, and I saw today other members of the TUC staff calling for Rosie Duffield to be expelled from the Labour Party. And the TUC itself has made a statement in support of this individual. Mike, his name is.
I mean, if I go to some, I don't know, theatrical outfitter and buy myself a bear outfit and dress up as a bear, that doesn't make me a bear. I might be a teddy bear, but I'm not a bear, am I? I mean, it's just nonsense.
But this is the Trade Union Congress.
I know.
The Trade Union Congress. I mean, how far have we come? I mean, it is astounding to me that the Trade Union Congress will allow itself to be dragged into something which is in utter and complete denial of science. But then again, I suppose they have to when they've already employed this man as a woman to be part of their staff. The whole idea that they defend a situation like this, it's astonishing. It's genuinely astonishing. That's all I can say.
Yeah, but the other thing, you've got to remember, the TUC actually look at the Labour Party and think it's socialist. So, what can you say? They really are quite bizarre. Techie, can you stick up the headline from the newspaper talking about Britain's great gold mine of energy worth 25 billion a year? Now, I should tell you folks that this headline apparently was only shown in England. An energy jackpot, 25 billion a year. Of course, next year's the general election year, Phil. It'll be running out next year, won't it?
Of course it will, as it does every time, and obviously the distinction here is what appears in the Scottish press versus what appears in the English press. We've often seen marked contradiction, in fact, completely opposite stories appearing in both, depending on which side you're viewing things from. But no, the Guardian's Betsy Reid had a good article on this, and it ties in with Keir Starmer, the pro-Labour. I mean, the Express, we know where they come from, and they will always back the union, as will the Guardian. But Labour pledges British jobs bonus, as in Betsy Reid's article, and sets out a green energy strategy, so pandering to the masses. And they're offering 500 million a year for low carbon sector, but say that critically, they say the North Sea oil and gas production will continue for decades. It's actually much longer than that, but plaudits to that, because it's at least giving backing to the fact that we are highly dependent on oil and gas and will be for the foreseeable future. So anybody that comes out and thinks you're going to switch it all off and things are going to be tickety-boo is a fool. Clean energy companies apparently under this scheme would be offered up to 500 million a year to set up manufacturing in the UK, which we in Scotland should be doing, to build our own wind turbines. Currently they're all mostly imported from outside, solar panels and other infrastructure. Wind and solar for me are not the answer. That's another show entirely. But certainly the infrastructure, renewable energy should be built, and oil and gas should be worked in the UK. And Keir Starmer said he gave assurances that the oil and gas would continue. But it's a British jobs bonus. They say 665,000 new jobs. Well, you know, the national statistics on this, when the national statistics, they cited sharp decreases in employment in the energy sector over the last 30 years to only about 175,000 employees. Energy UK states that almost 750,000 people are currently directly or indirectly employed in the energy sector. But here's the rub. I was a commercial and contracts manager for BP, Shell, Statoil, Qatar Petroleum, many of the majors. And two of the major projects I worked on, BP's Clare Ridge and Quad 204, 450 to 500 people, all highly paid engineers and professionals, based in Old Street, London for Clare Ridge, or Leatherhead and Quad 204. These are typically 5-year projects. They could be in Dundee, Glasgow, Inverness, anywhere we want them in Scotland, because 96.5% of the oil is in Scottish waters, 65% of the gas is in Scottish waters, and almost all new finds will be in Scottish waters, which is well over 60% of the UK's sea area. So no, this is a massive story that the people in England are being given the good news to vote Labour in, and in fairness to support industry, because industry needs our support. A lot of the green initiatives are not sensible, which is why we're in the mess we're in by relying on the idiots in the Scottish Greens. Some of their philosophies and policies are absolute economic suicide, and that's why a lot of them are failing. So now what we need is people to be pragmatic, sensible, understand the industry, and actually work with a socialist government with industrial capitalism, because that's what works. That's what the original idea was, not these usury people, the commercial and financial capitalists that are absolutely destroying this country. So no, and we can only achieve all of this, of course, through Scottish independence, when we can take control of our own resources and look after our own, and at the same time welcome others as we need to develop and grow as a nation and a people.
Yvonne, one of the vile things of British capitalism has reared its head this week as well. Now, you've lived down south like I have. Thames Water, which covers a vast area, a huge area, and has generated lots of profits and lots of bonuses and dividends recently, is on the verge of collapse because it's been raped. The company's been raped. The shareholders and the directors have taken, they haven't got money to put it into infrastructure, they haven't got money, and meanwhile they're pumping shit into the rivers, raw sewage. It is the epitome of everything that's wrong with British capitalism, is it not?
It's an absolute nightmare scenario. In fact, I think they've had emergency meetings about what to do in the event that it fails. And it was, I was so appalled with the way that the water companies are run in England that I started looking into Scottish water, and delighted to see that it's Scottish water isn't run like the English water companies. It belongs to Scotland. I don't think it's been privatised. And thankfully, I think that because we've seen what's happening in England, that there's no way we'll allow that, or should allow that, to happen in Scotland. But the thing that worries me is that once they've totally cocked up and poisoned the water supply in England, they'll start and look towards Scotland for more water, for cleaner water. They're already taking our energy. They're already, as we found out through Kenny McCaskill, they're already siphoning off all of Scotland's energy, leaving us with paying the highest bills in the UK.
Yep.
So,
well, they're doing it already in Wales. I think it's something like 500 billion litres a year or a month out of Wales. And the water that goes back into Wales, the Welsh people are paying more for their Welsh water than the English are paying for Welsh water. If you get
when I visit my daughter, I won't drink out of the tap. That water has been recycled 10 times. And, you know, there's just, we need to give a very clear message to England now, not sometime down the line, but now, to say hands off our water, because that will be the next resource that will go.
That's what will happen if we ever allow the Unionists back into control. Holyrood, Scottish Water is one of the things they'll sell off. The other thing I should just hasten to add, that UK shellfish now is banned everywhere because they've found E. coli because of all literally the shit going into the seas, out the rivers. Eva, it's just frightening to think if we allow a Labour Tory coalition in Holyrood, Scottish Water could go down the same road. It could not only kill our water, our famous water, it could kill our whiskey and gin industries. It could ruin our farming, our salmon fishing, our rivers, if they get their hands on the water company.
It'd make you want to dig a trench across the border, eh? As somebody once said. Diabolical. I cannot understand why the SNP do not consider that, and have not considered for the last few years, the urgent need for Scottish independence. We've spoken often about Scotland free of a desert. That's a couple of hundred years now that people have been saying that, and it remains as valid today as it ever did. That sitting on their hands, praying for, you know, some miraculous change is so incredibly pathetic. You think on Hepburn and Yusuf obviously think that if they can get 28, 29 MPs in Westminster, somehow the Tory or Labour government are going to say, yeah, that's fine, declare independence, we're going to sit down and negotiate the division of the assets with you. Let's not worry about the detail that we failed to do it when you had 30 odd MPs, and we didn't do it when you had 40 odd MPs, and we didn't do it when you had 56. But now that you've got a couple of dozen and a few more, were quite happy to negotiate that separation. Absolute and utter nonsense. Anybody that falls for that needs the back of their head looked for a zip.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other, some of the reasons I think summed up for me, Lloyd, I really want to get out, I've always wanted out of the union, but again encapsulated it for me, was the High Court or the Supreme Court in England ruling against the British government, that telling them that the Rwanda flights are illegal. And it opens the UK to the fact that all these people that have already sent to Rwanda could sue them for millions. It will make Windrush look like, nothing. And yet they're still trying to plough on and appeal what can't be appealed.
Well, I think it's beginning to show that under the chaos that the Tories have had for so many years, what's emerged at the top with Sunak and Braverman are people who have not read the treaties that they are signatories to, particularly the European Convention on Human Rights, amongst others, the UN Convention on Human Rights, for instance. But for a second, Roddy, can I just go back onto the water issue? The water issue was the issue that became the central point that drove the movement for independence in Wales when Liverpool was allowed to flood Capel Cerrig, and all the water from Capel Cerrig then was used to put in the taps in Liverpool. That was a central thing. But more importantly, what we've got coming now is the Internal Market Act. The Internal Market Act takes away the protection that Scottish Water has. Because if the Internal Market Act is not resisted and resisted extremely vigorously, then our water can be put up for sale. And the Scottish Parliament will not be able to do a damn thing about it. Now, why is it that none of our politicians seem to understand this? They'll talk about it as, it's another assault on devolution. It's not an assault on devolution. It's an assault on our natural resources. It's the theft of our natural resources, but the rightful ownership of our people. But the Rwanda issue shows you how low these people have come. I'm looking at the son of immigrants from the Indian subcontinent who are making decisions about people who probably aren't in the same circumstances as their parents were, but people who need to escape. And their attitude is, I'm all right, Jack, pull up the ladder. But also thinking to themselves that any time they come across a law or come across a convention or a treaty of which is a challenge to their pernicious ideology, they think they can ride roughshod over it. Sunak announced this afternoon, we'll definitely go to the appeal court. These people are authoritarians. They're very verging on dictatorship because they come from that class where, same as Johnson, where they believe that they have a God-given right to every turn and that the law does not, or indeed morality doesn't apply to them.
Yeah, indeed. We're running out of time, but Phil, on this, to go back, if I could, to staying on the water, but Thames Water. What simply is going to happen here is what they've done on so many occasions. They're going to socialise the losses. The British taxpayer is going to pick up a bill for billions that's been ineffectively stolen by the directors and the shareholders. The British taxpayer will pay billions. They'll clean it all up and they'll hand it back to the city spivs and start the whole bloody cycle again.
Yeah, it's exactly what happened in the banking crash of 2008. Only Iceland put bankers in jail, which we all should have done. We should not have bailed out the banks. We should allow them to fold, and we should be protecting the investors and not the people who have funds and savings in the bank, not the big investors. You take a risk, and the bankers they went back to doing exactly what they did, just as is going to happen in here. And on this, I mean, there's another good Guardian article on Alex Lawson, 28th of June. The water industry has been facing growing criticism, and this has been in decline since privatisation came in 32 years ago. Remember, this has been ongoing for a very long time. And, hosepipe bans, dumping sewage into the waterways in England, notably. It's the biggest water company in the UK. And Sarah Bentley, its executive, suddenly resigned without explanation. And then all of a sudden we see government and regulators started to draft contingency plans to contain or control its ballooning £14 billion debt. Now, this company is in emergency talks to secure extra funding, from where, just as you say, the people pay and the billionaires continue to pay dividends. The shareholders continue to get dividends. And rather than investing in the system which we get in Scottish Water, what these guys have been doing have been paying dividends for the last 32 years and creaming it off and increasing the water charges to the people. So if Thames Water collapses, the government have got to step in to ensure that the 15 million customers in England, 15 million, are still provided with water that are up to the standards. And as Yvonne has said already, it's really not. It's maybe just above the standards, and those standards are ever diminishing as profits come before the welfare and the benefit of the people. So no, it's a scam, and we must protect Scottish Water and other institutions. There are plenty of resources in Scotland and utilities that need to be returned to the public domain, because that's the only way they're going to be protected. And one of the first ones should be Scottish Rail and the rail network.
Yep. And another thing, I'm going to be controversial here. I usually allow you people to, you're the controversial people, and I can escape. But I'm going to be controversial. I don't know if you've been following the case, lads and lasses, of Nigel Farage, a vile man, a man whose politics I cannot stand, a man who I find is like a cheese grater going down my back when he starts talking. I just don't like him. However, because certain people don't like him, they've cancelled his bank account. They're putting sanctions on him because they don't like his politics. Now, I loathe his politics, but I protect his right to have those politics. And that should be the right. And the fact that they're taking away his bank account, and also it turns out on his families, it's the exact same thing that's happening in the moment with Russia and America and with China, where they decided, well, no, it's your money, but we're taking it because we don't like the way you operate. Now, you may not like it, but it's wrong at the level of stealing a nation's money. It's wrong to steal a punter's money because you don't like their political beliefs. And we've seen it also with people who've opposed the woke ideology, have been cancelled, lost their jobs, lost their incomes. It's getting really, the democracy in this country is diminishing all the time. And that's why we need independence. And we have to make sure that we have a proper written constitution, unlike the UK, that protects people, even people like Farage, who we vehemently disagree with politically. They should have the same protection as everybody else. So that's my wee rant for the end of year rant over. Ladies, gentlemen, can I thank you for all your help this year, and for putting Prism where it is, and for all you people watching who have been so supportive. As I say, it's going to be a wee bit different over the next few weeks. We've been chatting and we've come up with ideas with some shows we think you might like. I'm off to France for a few days next week, so these guys here are coming up with ideas this week. I'm getting a wee bit of a week off. They come up with the idea, and we'll be back next week. I don't know what with, but we'll be back. And until we see you, take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.